Good morning, Anthony. God bless you. Good morning from a locked down England. Doesn't feel very locked down here. It just feels like it always does. But we are, in fact, now in lockdown. So, like Anthony has been for the last little while, I think we have a little bit more freedom than you do, Anthony, in that we're allowed to go more than 5 miles in any direction. So, that is good. But not good the fact that we're back into lockdown after all this time. Absolutely stunningly beautiful morning here today. I was throwing the ball for Buster earlier on. He's rushing down towards the pond at the bottom there. I love the way that he sort of gallops off down there and waits in eager anticipation of the ball zipping through the air towards. Well, I always throw it away from him, so he has to run again. So here we are. Annoying. So the lockdown does mean that we will be restarting the live streams of services on Saturday and Sunday from here, from the monastery, rather than from the church in Lincoln. Although I will be keeping the church in Lincoln open for a while for people to come and have private prayer and light candles and do all those other things they need to do, because last time people understandably became rather distressed and not being able to go to church, see their priest, and all that sort of thing. We have to do all that carefully so we don't break the law at all, but on the other hand, still manage to minister to people in a meaningful way. Who else has arrived? We've got Thekla, who sent me a whole series of autumn things, and possibly the last flower. We've got 1 or 2 roses still out in the monastery. They're highly fragrant ones. They would have been grown by a particular grower. They're delicious. They're wonderful to smell. There we go. Good morning, Maria. God bless you. Please give my greetings also to Alex. Good morning, Vicky. Good morning, Troubadour and Fog. Good morning, Judith. Well done, making it. Good morning, Tony. The glistening kingdom of Jack Frost. Oh, well, we have no frost at all here today. But it was quite warm last night. Even though we had a clear sky and beautiful stars when I got up, there was nothing there. Good morning, Christine. Good morning, Tatiana, who started today with the midnight office, and then we have matins. Then today we had the Divine Liturgy, which we try and have every Thursday, or sometimes on Wednesday evening, and make a night of it. Good morning, Natalia. Today, we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 16, verses 2 to 5. Quite a lot in there, so I don't want to hurry us. And also there's quite a lot in what we're going to be looking at tomorrow, which is a shorter bit, but very important indeed, on the very center of our faith. Good morning, Margaret. You had an opportunity for liturgy yesterday before lockdown. Very good. I know that Archbishop Nikitas told all of his clergy to serve the liturgy one final time before lockdown. I think that was a very good idea. Okay, so let's read those few verses. Just so you know, and in case you didn't see yesterday, I'll read from verse 1. Yesterday, good morning, Elias. Yesterday we find the women going off into the town, into Jerusalem, just before Shabbat begins, before the Sabbath starts. And what do? They buy spices that smell lovely. Now, when the Sabbath was past, that's Saturday evening, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that they might come and anoint him. Now we go into Sunday morning. Very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. And they said among themselves, "Who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb for us?" But when they looked up, they saw the stone had been rolled away, for it was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a long white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Good morning, Vera. Good morning, Steve. Very early. So Sunday, very early in the morning. We think probably it would be around about 5:30 in the morning. And if you look at the sunrise times for Jerusalem in March and April, you'll see it be somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning. Let's say 6. So they set off while it was still dark, and they arrive at the tomb as it is getting light. The sun is just appearing over the horizon. And that's quite important because it's lighting the whole scene, which means they can see quite clearly with their eyes what is happening. And you might say, well, what about inside the tomb? Well, inside the tomb, when the sun is low, the sun will be shining directly through the door of the tomb. If you look at a plan of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you'll see that the tomb entrance faces towards the east. So the women would be approaching it from the east, and the sun will be behind them, and the sun shining into the tomb itself. It looks as if they probably set out individually, not all together, not all as one group. They certainly appear to have come from different classes of people. Some were quite strongly related to the Theotokos or to Joseph. Others, like Mary Magdalene, were not at all. And Salome, obviously, was the mother of James and John. So again, quite possibly of quite known to the Lord already, and they've been following him. But it seems that they set off individually, and it's quite probable that they all arrived slightly at different times. Mary Magdalene first, according to the other Gospels, and she then rushes back. And the other ones moments afterwards. They see slightly different things as a result. And depending who told them what, they see and they report to the Gospel writers different things. And this is what goes into the Gospel writer's head. And this is what he then spills out for everybody else to know. And in this case, in this particular story, they arrive. And the women, that probably means Mary married to Joses and Salome married to Zebedee, that they are talking and they're wondering and worried. They have plenty to be worried about, actually. Early in the morning, the place is not bustling with people. The sun is just coming up. All sensible people are yawning, stretching, and reaching for their teas made and switching that off in the hope. That's a very old-fashioned thing, isn't it? Teas made, a throwback to the 1960s, 70s, and hoping for their first cup of tea, rubbing the sleep out of their eyes and moaning to themselves their children jump all over them, wanting breakfast and to get up. I just reminded myself of a cup of tea. But these women are setting off for the tomb as soon as they were able. They waste no time in doing anything else. They bought the spices the day before at night. They've probably had a terrible, terrible, terrible night. You can imagine how it would be. The whole of Friday night, the whole of Saturday, the whole of Saturday night. And all that time, they'd be feeling totally washed out, wringed out, terrible grief, that horrific feeling when somebody you love has died, where somehow or other the whole world seems to collapse around you. There's a song, actually, isn't there? I can't remember who it is sings it. If I remember, I'll say, but it seems to me to describe perfectly how they must have felt, where she sings about, how does the sun keep on shining? That's exactly what she sings. It's gone out of my mind who she is. Come back in a moment. And these women, in their distress, unlike the male disciples, gather themselves together and gather their wits and their courage into their hands, and also in their hands they put the miron, the spices, the aromas, and they set off. They've got lots to be frightened of. Lone women, maybe a lone woman, coming to a group of Roman auxiliaries. Well, they weren't noted for being polite. They weren't noted for being, as it were, new men. They were noted for things like rape and pillage. And having had a cold night, rape and pillage might well have been on their minds. Lone women coming to a group of Roman auxiliaries. As we were reminded the other day, they would not have had wives with them. So that was dangerous. They're coming to a tomb that we know from the other Gospels has been sealed. Well, if you're in this country and the police or the government seal something, you don't tend to unseal it without permission, because that way is the quickest way to jail. So you don't do that. Who would unseal it? Well, the Roman soldiers definitely would not. So they're worried about what to do about that too. Then there's a huge stone door, a round stone, carved round stone, fitting in a groove. And it is said by Mark that it was exceedingly large. And a group of strong young men would have found it difficult to move the stone. That was the whole point. The whole point was it would be very difficult to move. You didn't want people going in there and stealing from the body. You didn't want wild animals being able to nuzzle the stone out of the way and go in there and eat the body. A huge stone. They can't possibly move it. And they've come without any men. And there are only 3 of them maximum. So it's going to be rather tricky for them to do that. Okay? Rather tricky. Also, of course, it is dark, or rather, it is just getting light. 5:30 in the morning, sunrise. The quiet streets, the fear of the dark, fear of the Romans, fear of the Jewish authorities who might well come and arrest them, who might well want to arrest them and torture them, to say, well, whereabouts are his followers? What are they doing? And they're worried about what they might find when they arrive there. And like everybody else who's feeling deeply bereaved, they know that the sight of the body of the Lord, even though he's now been wrapped up in swathing bands, just like he was when he was born, and placed on a stone shelf, just like he was when he was born, the sight of the body is going to deeply distress them. Okay? Sunday morning. Sun coming up. It says then, rather beautifully in the Greek, we go into the present historic. And having looked up, they see that the stone has been rolled away because it was extremely large. So the Lord didn't decide, okay, we'll let them struggle with the stone and discover the place empty. Somebody, presumably the angel, as it said elsewhere, the angels rolled away the stone from the mouth of the tomb. Because the women had no chance of doing that, this is something God did for them. And they see this, and of course they're shocked. It's not at all what they expect to find. There are no Roman soldiers around. This is strange too. Even Mary Magdalene, when she arrives earlier, finds that there are no Roman soldiers around. I'm not going to go into the other Gospels because they also are at a unity within themselves. We take them one by one. And they go in. And there on what it says is the right-hand side, they find a young man dressed in a white robe. We know that it's an angel. They can see him quite clearly because the sun is behind them. They can see also the rest of the tomb quite clearly because the sun is shining directly into the tomb. It says that they are amazed, alarmed, frightened, shocked, distressed. All of that comes from one word in Greek. They're amazed, alarmed, frightened, shocked, distressed. As some people might say in the space, you've blown my mind. Their minds were blown. They looked in. They didn't really take everything in, but they looked and they saw, and what they saw was a young man clothed in a white robe, sitting on the right-hand side. Now, on Sunday, if you watch the live streaming from here or live streaming from anywhere else, you will see that the priest reads the gospel, and it's always the priest, not the deacon. The priest reads the gospel dressed in full vestments on Sunday morning for Matins, the Matins Gospel, which is one of the resurrection Gospels, standing on the right-hand side of the Holy Table. And opposite him, if there's a server, the server will stand with a candle. So the light shines across the Holy Table onto the Gospel book and onto the priest. And this is really important, that as you look into what looks to be like the tomb now, because the doors are open, but the priest doesn't come out. He does on the odd occasion, but only when there's something like a Sunday, which is also a feast of the Lord, like Palm Sunday, the entry into Jerusalem. You look in and you see the priest lit up. Of course, it should be very early in the morning before the sun rises. This happens. You see the priest lit up, reading about the resurrection. And the priest there represents that young man in the long white robe. Actually, in Greek, it doesn't say anything about it being long. It says in a white robe, and the word itself has the connotation of being long, as a robe always is. Okay, sitting on the right-hand side, the sun behind them. Now, as they enter into the tomb, they go into the tomb. They enter the place of death. That's interesting by itself, isn't it? So in a sense, by entering the tomb, they enter into the death of Christ. They give up their previous life. Their life, as it were, you find dead people in the tomb, and they go into the tomb, and in a sense, their old life dies. We know that it does. Their life is never going to be the same ever again. They enter into the death of Christ. The young man sitting there, dressed in the white robe, is young. He is in his prime of life. There is no sign at all of him growing old. A young man, and this word in Greek, is actually anybody up to the age of 40. So any man up to the age of 40. So it's a person in his prime of life, probably the same age as the Lord. So in his 30s, or look to be in his 30s. He hasn't got any age because he's actually an angel who's appeared before them. No wings, notice. No big halo around his head. No description of him, except that he's young. That part of it doesn't surprise them. He's male. That doesn't surprise them. And he's in a white robe. That seems to surprise them. The fathers often say that he's clothed in righteousness, in purity, and in light. And this is why it is they can see him so very clearly. St. Jerome and St. Gregory the Great, both meditating upon this, say, there's nothing sinister about this vision. He's on the right-hand side, the dexios side of the tomb, the right-hand side of the tomb, not on the sinistros side of the tomb. Suddenly, the tomb becomes a place in which there is nothing sinistros, nothing on the left-hand side, the bad side, the sinister side. Everything is on the dexios side, the right side, is filled with life, with light, with purity, with goodness, with youthfulness, and so on. And it's dexios, correctness, righteousness, beauty. They both of them, along with many of the other early church fathers, describe this moment as being one of our pure joy, because of what the women do next. I'm not going to say what they do next. We'll hang on to that till tomorrow. But we shall leave them for the moment, amazed, alarmed, frightened, shocked, distressed, looking at an angel. Good morning, Christos. Lockdown expected as of Saturday in Greece. The churches will close again. I have the impression it'll be more difficult for us this time. I think it probably will be more difficult for us too this time. People are unhappy about being locked down again. No longer trust the government. Do it for the government once, but actually wondering why they have to do it a second time. Okay. Good morning, Jovan. God bless you. The Anglican Catholic Church is here fighting the battle in UK. Yes, they're making representations to the MPs. I have no idea how that has got on. I would doubt very much that our own bishops are doing anything of the sort. Christos, Father, why does the story, the joy of the resurrection story, seem to affect us less than our problems, fears, and anxieties? It's probably because we're made out of flesh. You know, we have to put all of our fears, anxieties, everything else into the context of the resurrection of Christ. You know, what are we actually anxious and fearful about? There is nothing whatever, nothing at all, that I'm going to be worrying about in 100 years from now. In fact, I'm going to reduce that amount of time. There's probably absolutely nothing at all I'll be worrying about in 50 years from now. I can reduce it again. It's almost certain that I will not be worrying about anything at all, and this head will not be aching in 30 years from now. I would give myself maybe another 90, maximum. Schweitis, I'm enjoying the autumn so much. So nice to see one. I love the spring, the summer, the winter. It's always worthwhile that every year you go past your own death date, as well as your own birth date. You have your own death day too. And therefore, all the anxieties and problems that we have need to be kept in that sort of context. And for most people, their greatest anxiety is dying. And for people who are Christians, death is a bed of hope for us. Death, we say, has lost its sting, as St. Paul says. Death has no more fear or hold over us because Christ is risen from the dead. As it says, and we say so many times on Easter and afterwards, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. And therefore, if the greatest of our worries can be taken away by faith in Christ, nothing else matters at all. Nothing. Not our reputation, not how wealthy we are, not how clever we are, not about all of our experiences or history, or certainly not stupid things like background and class and career and all those sorts of things. None of those matter at all. It's a truism. I said the other day, I get to sit next to people as they die. I remember sitting next to my uncle, one of my uncles, a few days before he died, and he turned to somebody else who's sitting by him. He said, "My greatest regret is I didn't take all my holidays and spend them with my family." I thought, what a shame. His greatest regret that he didn't actually use the time for recreation in the way that he could have done. He was worried more about his career and other things, retired and shortly thereafter died. Okay, so tricky. So we don't need to worry about any of those other things at all. Okay, they don't matter. Doesn't matter how you're dressed. Doesn't matter whether you're eating posh food or simple food. It doesn't matter whether you live in a big house. You can only ever inhabit one room at a time anyway. Doesn't matter how many cars you've got. You can only go around in one of them. And if you don't have one, you're freed from all sorts of other anxieties. There are things that are important, and one of them, and all of these things, are to do with communion. Communion with God, communion with each other, and communion with all other people and things on earth. And that is important. Nothing else matters at all. Okay? So, let's see, anybody else saying stuff? People up here, let's go back. Thank you, Phoebe. Keeping an eye on what's happening in the various ecclesiastical committees. Petrula, probably didn't mention the Orthodox Church, which I very much doubt the Orthodox Church did anything. Vera, God bless you. We will be keeping the church open for private prayer. That is allowed. Not quite sure what it is Andrew is referring to there. Maria Helena, thank God, I am very well. Let go, let God, says Thekla. Yes, that's very good. I remember when I was a youngster, there's some sort of song about allowing the worries to come one at a time. Otherwise, you worry about them twice. You worry about them before they happen, and worry about them again when they turn up. You've got to sort of plan ahead, but you don't need to worry about these things. Be faithful to God. And it may well be that you end up with absolutely nothing. Well, never mind. Then Berezi. Tracy has a green heart, just as well as I'm colorblind. Phoebe and Margaret pray for her. Churches in the UK remain open. They probably won't. But these things. Okay. Right. It's very sad, Thekla, if you've not been able to get to church since March. A lot of people in that situation. Very, very tricky. Pray for your dad in 2 cents in 2 weeks. Okay, Christos. Paragalo. Good morning, Harry. Give Cyprus my love. Light a candle for me if you go into a church, which I'm sure you will be. Yes, I have lots of mini rainbows floating behind me here. The thing is, there's a little machine over here that casts rainbows everywhere. I love them. Okay, right. God bless you. Pray for each other. Please continue to pray for those people who've been asked to pray for. And I'm going to simplify it today, just for today and yesterday, and remind you to pray for Joseph, who has got this virus. He's very ill in hospital already with cancer. He's having his chemotherapy delayed, which clearly is not a good thing to happen for the poor man. Okay, your prayers. God bless you. Enjoy what you can enjoy. Even if you're locked down, even if you're isolated, look out of the window, enjoy the sunshine, look at the rain, enjoy the way it glistens and washes everything clean. Be excited by the fog and the mist, because it makes everything look so mysterious. Delight in the weeds that are growing in the garden, because they're so amazingly resilient. Okay? God willing, I shall be able to be with you on Friday, Andrew. Okay? Right, God bless you all. Pray for me.